Welcome to the Confidence in You podcast, designed to help you build confidence and create positive, lasting change in your life. And here's your host, Helen Luxford.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us again on the podcast today. Today we're joined by Skip Bowman, and I just want to give you a bit of background on Skip before we launch into the podcast. Skip is an Aussie-born boy, an entrepreneur who moved to Europe a while ago, and he is now one of Europe's leading experts on putting growth mindset and psychological safety to work in leadership, teams and organisations. Today he shares with us and talks about psychological safety, growth mindset based on Carol Dweck's work, being open to learning, and most importantly, the power of maintaining great relationships. Skip believes in collaboration and relationships are the key to success, and so do I. And almost all great work and living a full life, requires people to talk, share, decide and deliver on promises and be true to your word. Developing a growth mindset in your life or team is one of the most important steps you can take in leading yourself and others. Today he shares with us about what really matters, and he talks about how he juggles a busy business, being a husband and a dad to 5 kids, and 3 of them are under 3. And doing that whilst he and his wife are just renovating a hotel in France at the same time. So it's fair to say he's good at juggling the demands of a busy life. Skip puts his success down to the relationships he holds with others, and how having meaningful connections and relationships is what helps you through life's ups and downs. You're there for them when they need you, and they're there for you when you need them. And being able to reach out, talk to others and ask for help is so important. Skip believes that the key to life is relationships, and he talks more about this in his new book, which is coming out in September, called Safe to Great. And you can pre-order that now so you don't miss out on Skip's website, www.skip-bowman.com, or you can link in with Skip on LinkedIn. Just search for LinkedIn Skip Bowman. So join us today to hear Skip share with us. Let's get into it.
Today, I'm excited to say that we're joined by Skip Bowman on our podcast. Skip is the creator of Safe to Great concept, which is based on his own research and consulting on how to apply concepts of psychological safety and growth mindset in global companies. Soon available is Skip's book, Safe to Great, which will be available in September. Skip has been sharing and implementing his ideas in leadership and organisational development projects for companies across the world for many years. He is also the founder and Chief Transformation Officer at Global Mindset, a consultant company dedicated to making global organisations safe for great work. As all jobs become more global, every member of a company needs a global mindset and the ability to be confident and competent with the unknown and the unusual. Skip believes that the cognitive and emotional skills of a global mindset not only create inclusive workplaces, they also enable people to deal with and find innovative solutions in complex, ambiguous, and fast-paced work environments, which so much more so now post-COVID. Skip believes that when you can manage and thrive in complex cultural settings, you also have the skills to succeed in complex business settings and in life. In this way, having a global mindset is correlated with having a more developed and sophisticated mind. Skip coaches senior leaders and their teams in how to achieve transformations in business and culture through principles of contagious change, I love that, and rapid, effective and sustainable change that is positive and self-catalyzing. Skip's success builds on a combination of creating a powerful vision, designing creative concepts customised to the client, and fun to learn and use, as well as an ability to bring stakeholders from across the organisation together in a strong coalition for change. Globally savvy, he speaks at and leads workshops in Europe, North America, Africa and the Middle East. He uses 2 working languages, Danish and English. He grew up in Perth, Australia. He's an Aussie boy, and he has spent the majority of the last 25 years based in Europe. Skip's approach is based on 4 values: change, explore, create, and inspire. For him, the key mission of leadership and organisational development is to inspire change with original training and consulting methods that touch the hearts and minds of leaders, helping them to see and feel the reality of global changes and find the courage to think and act differently. During the last 20 years, Skip has worked with clients such as Amcor, Merck, Danfoss, Siemens, BHP Billiton, and a myriad of others. And today he's with us on the podcast. So thanks for being here, Skip.
Pleasure.
So that is quite a comprehensive bio, but for those that don't know you, can you tell us a bit more in your own words about your background and what was your inspiration in creating and starting Safe to Great?
Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for inviting me to speak today. It's great to be here. Safe to Great is an idea to make organisations safe for great work. Safety is becoming a really big issue. Here we're talking about psychological safety. I mean, physical safety is in more manufacturing companies like BHP Billiton, where I have done some consulting work in the past. That's an important issue. But what we're seeing today is a sort of like an overwhelming pandemic, so to speak, of mental health issues. And this has got a lot to do with, people feeling overwhelmed, stretched, struggling post-COVID, or even prior to that, with the rapid changes in the way that we work today. I set about sort of exploring when I first started working on Safe to Great about 6 years ago, has leadership changed? And I realized, no, it hasn't really changed. And that's actually the problem.
Yeah.
Because in reality, the world around us has changed a lot and is changing even faster. So I felt that safety was important. But the key here is people are really struggling mentally at work. And we need sort of ways of leading that actually help us find more capacity without working longer hours, right? I mean, that's not going to work. So we're going to have to rethink that. That's what the book's a lot about. So how do we address some of these really big issues of climate change in our organizations, but more importantly, address that the kind of organizations we create are mentally healthy.
Yeah.
That they work for us. So that's a little bit of that idea. And I got inspired to, when I saw these theories coming around, like growth mindset and psychological safety, I thought they were kind of fun. And sort of connecting together, linking to the famous Jim Collins book, Good to Great, I thought it was fun to say Safe to Great, because I really think that psychological safety is a term we're hearing everywhere, and for good reasons. People are getting pretty stressed out there, and not just at work, but the whole world is under pressure. And pandemic, we just saw some even more extreme versions of that. So I think it's relevant, and I'm hoping it not only speaks to the time now about what we need to do as leaders, but also moving ahead in the next 10 years, which are going to be really bumpy. We're seeing a bit of that now, and it's going to get bumpy, I'm afraid. And we need new leadership thinking in that area. So that's why I'm here. And,
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, because coming out of 20 years in corporate HR, even I saw the changes needed in leadership, and it's so slow. For some reason, it is slow to change at that top level. And if we don't change there, as you and I both know, an organisation's culture starts at the top. And so I have worked with some wonderful CEOs, and I've worked with some that are very old school command and control, and the command and control just doesn't work anymore. But in life as well, there's so many demands on people today, with just being busy, with keeping up with the pace of change, and just everything. That the global pandemic is one thing, but even before that, as you say, there was a lot of demands on people, and psychological safety now is in the spotlight for organisations, but I also think it's important for communities and for people to realise that it's okay to not be okay and to ask for help and to put your hand up and say, I'm struggling a little bit. So with that in mind, what would you say has been a big challenge for you, or one of your biggest challenges in life?
Wow. I could take it, I'm very happy. Let's say the book, actually just getting this book to fruition, primarily because everything else that goes on in our lives makes that difficult.
Yes.
I mean, soon after I started this journey, my mother passed away in Australia. So that's like 5 years ago. And so that was a fairly significant event in one's life. Then I sort of came back, got engaged to be married again, bought a house, had my third child with my second wife. I have 5 children now. So a year or 2 years later, I had twins with her. We bought a hotel in France that we're renovating. And she has a career like I do in leadership development. So, we're exploring how do we make all, and to be honest, that's really, when I say it's a big challenge, at times it's extremely challenging to have 3 children under the age of 3. and we're very proud of what we're doing there. But that can mean that books don't hit deadlines and careers don't quite go like they're meant to. I did forget to mention the pandemic and all of that, which in my business, I had to let go of most of my team in that process. So, there's been a lot of challenges. And I think I'm lucky in many ways, but I've certainly tasted a little bit of what so many people have, where we didn't have any choices and we had to make some very tough decisions. And I think sometimes that's good for us, that we get reminded of what really matters. But it's been bumpy. But my point would be is that, and I'm going to talk more about that today with you, is the quality of your relationships really determine, that ability to have the courage and strength to work through this. And I think that's probably the key message of Safe to Great. It's a relational model. It's about how do you, and I like the fact that you're raising this community question. I absolutely think that psychological safety must be considered at a community level. If we look at the green transformation, it's very much that. And so we can't just sort of assume that companies just can operate in some sort of bubble and that we don't care about how things are going in terms of creating great communities and that sustain us. And that's something we definitely need to work on. Yeah. So there's a few challenges there. A few challenges, mainly on the home front.
Well, I'm in Melbourne and you're in Copenhagen, but in Melbourne we had a pretty big, tough lockdown.
Huge lockdown. Yeah.
It was massive, and
mind-boggling.
My brother had just had a heart attack and stroke and was in hospital in intensive care, and then the big hard lockdown, we couldn't see him for 11 weeks. So that was really challenging for us, but in COVID. But even before COVID, there's so many different things that life throws at us. And when we talk about psychological safety, can you just expand a little bit on that, about what that means? Because where I feel safe, someone else might not feel safe, and what I need in my life will be different to someone else. So overarching, what is psychological safety?
Yeah, the key inspiration is Amy Edmondson, and the work that she's done in, if you like, in the corporate setting, leadership setting. She's one of the key leading proponents of the idea. In that context, it's addressing this challenge that in organizations, in our teams, and perhaps in our relationships too, we don't always feel that we can voice the things that matter to us. We don't struggle to be able to speak up about our ideas, but also our concerns. And that why we don't do that is not necessarily inside us. There can be things. But her point is that fundamentally it's the quality of the relationship you have to your team, to your partner, to your organization that shape to what extent do you feel willing to take the risk to speak up.
Yep.
The opposite is a conspiracy of silence. She talks, which is the natural tendency when we meet relationships where we're not comfortable, for us simply not to speak up, to not be ourselves, to not say the things that matter, to not necessarily share our gift or genius with people. And that relationship grounding, I think, really has shifted leadership thinking a bit. I mean, it's not the only systemic theory that we have about leadership, but it's shifted some thinking here to make us start thinking about, how am I making it easier for somebody else to be themselves and to express themselves and to share the things that matter? That's not a bad focus. And I think that's different language than we've heard before, even though you and I have been in this business for quite a few years. I think this is new language. And I think it's helped people see that relationship is important to just, whether people speak up or don't.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to trust that you're going to be listened to, you're going to be heard, and that there's not going to be judgment or retribution for you expressing your opinions and ideas. And I have definitely seen in corporate where that has been encouraged, and open discussion and agree to disagree and all of that. And the diversity that comes from that, and the ideas that come from that, because someone might say something and you go, well, none of us have thought of that. And then we take that and we build on it and we run with it. Likewise, there have been times many years ago that I've worked in organisations where you couldn't speak up because of fear of retribution, because next time you won't be invited to the meeting, or worse still, that you won't be considered for a promotion, or you'll be punished in some way. And going back to community and just general relationships, I think that is true as well in my coaching experience, that I was coaching an executive recently, and they came to me to find their voice. That was why they wanted to come to me, so they could speak up in meetings. So it is definitely something that is not just at work, because she said to me, and this was beautiful to hear. She said, "You've changed my life, because not only can I see it and my boss see it, but my partner can see it, that I'm now able to speak up and I'm able to voice my opinion." So I think that relational system is so important. So what does it, what are the common themes that you're seeing when you go into organisations and you can see that there needs to be a change? What are some of the things that you notice?
Well, mostly I'd be called in when, clients they'll probably say something about growth mindset. That tends to attract them a little more than psychological safety, but essentially it's that sort of always wanting to change faster, be more agile, to be able to do more, all this kind of stuff. In principle, though, they don't realize quite why they don't have it. And what I've been able to do over the years and develop a methodology is to be able to measure why they're not able to change quickly. And by and large, it comes back to what you mentioned earlier in our conversation, and the book talks about it at great length. The issue is command and control. I mean, by and large, that is the problem. We can pretend we can call it whatever we want, but it tends to make organizations very siloed, very change resistant, rather than the opposite of what you're actually looking for. And so, if you want change, and we want it to be people to be motivated, we want commitment. That's why I call it commitment premium, and commitment is the opposite. This is based on autonomy, and when we're working with that, we get these high levels of performance, and it's quite substantial, in the research that I have. And that's just backing up lots of research into this. We know that if you have less command and control, you get better performance, you get better quality, you get better customer service, you get all the things you want. But letting go of control is actually very, very difficult to achieve. And a lot of white men like myself don't like giving it up, to be honest. And that's just calling it like it is. So that's part of this reimagination of leadership that has to take place. It cannot be alpha male. I mean, that's not going to get us anywhere. We can't get rid of it entirely, but we definitely have to work on it. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And the diversity, the thought process that comes from diversity, and the thought leadership that comes from diversity in the room is just so important, that we allow everyone to speak and we allow everyone to express, because that's what we need, because we live in a global community. Regardless of where you live in the world, there's going to be a diverse set of people that live in your neighbourhood, regardless of where you are. And being able to allow them to speak up and offer their opinions and their ideas is exactly where we need to be for continuous improvement, for innovation, but just for society in general, is Absolutely. Allowing people to have their voice. I've got a podcast coming out tomorrow with an Australian elite athlete, where she's now gone into coaching, and she's very much in diversity and inclusion and helping people find their voice. And we spoke about when you want to express yourself, it gets stuck in your throat, and being able to, and you might swallow, or you might cough, or you might but being able to speak up. And she said that comes from a sense of belonging, and you're talking about relationships. So I think there's absolute congruency in both of these approaches. And safe to great is a really good concept, because I think we need that across the board, not just in organisations, but in relationships at home, in relationships in community, in sporting teams. All of those things are just so important. What would you say, in hindsight, is something that you wish you'd done earlier, or wish you'd done that you haven't done yet?
Ooh, wow.
That's the tough question.
Yeah, I think I would have written a book, but I think having had a relatively busy life and career, I have 5 kids in total, and have tried to be a good partner along the way. I don't think you should spend too much time worrying about what you didn't do. Could I have done it younger? Could I have done it? Yeah. And I mean, well, okay. On the other hand, I'm very much a forward thinking. I'm not very nostalgic. So I've met some very inspiring 80-year-olds who, one in particular inspires me a lot, in the sense that keep reinventing yourself, keep moving forward, keep becoming relevant to younger members of the family, to the youth of the world, because we should. That's what keeps us going, and I'm very much dedicated to that. So I don't really worry about it. I mean, I had 3 kids at the age of 54, so it's like, okay, why not? And the reality is, I think I'm a better dad than I was when I was 29. To be honest, in many ways, simply because I enjoy it too in a different way. I mean, it's a real privilege to have my little twins rolling around in bed in the morning with us, and have that ability. I've had twins, I had 2 other kids before that, and I was actually an au pair many years ago. I looked after 2 boys in France as an au pair. So, I think everything has a time and place. I suppose early in my career, I may have wanted to rush everything and try to do everything. I still do like to try to do a lot of things, as I just explained when I said what are my challenges, but I don't regret. I don't sort of say, oh, yes, I should have done this. I mean, I'm much more interested in making sure that I make those right choices moving forward, stay as energized and as healthy as I can, and to want to participate as actively and try to understand the world and pass that understanding, or how other people understand it well too. That's what keeps you young. I mean, and I don't mean young and sort of like wanting to be a 15-year-old. That's not my point, but keep us agile in our mind, willing to learn, willing to grow. You've got to live that. And when I've seen people in their 80s still doing that, that inspires me to sort of think, I'd like to have a life, trajectory that means that as long as my health holds out, that I can still be, fun, inspiring, and good to hang out with when I'm 80 or 90. So I think there's plenty of time. Gosh, there's a whole career left in me. So that's how I look at it.
Absolutely, and I'm the same. I'm not looking to retire anytime soon. I love what I do, and meeting people and helping them and seeing the shifts and the changes they can make in themselves is so inspirational for me and motivational for me.
Cool stuff. That's going to keep us going. That'll keep us going for quite a few decades.
It's just fantastic, because when you see people, regardless of their age, and most of the people I'm working with are 40 plus, and to see them have been blocked or stuck all their life, and then through coaching and through conversations, they're able to go, and let go of stuff. So you talk about letting go of control. What I find when people are able to let go of control in whatever way it is, and for some people it's trying to control their partner or their kids, or trying to control their life, like the pandemic. We couldn't change that, right? So helping people accept that we can't control everything, and to focus on what you can control, so you can control your response to those things. So that's what you can focus on. But you spoke about juggling, and you've got a lot on your plate, like 5 kids, a book, you're working, your wife is working, you're renovating a hotel in France.
We're renovating it, and
How do you? What are your strategies? Because this I think is key. A lot of people are feeling lost, overwhelmed, unsure, just too much going on in a busy world. My goodness, you've got more balls in the air than most people. So what are some tips or techniques you can give our listeners on how to just still have time to play with the kids and to have your downtime and to reset? What are some of your strategies that you or your wife use?
I mean, I think it starts with her and I have a really good sort of like both, it's a good working relationship. It's also a relationship where if the other one isn't quite living up to expectations, can manage a confronting conversation quite well. I mean, she's a leadership trainer too, so it's I think that matters. But how do you do all these things? I'm not a particularly structured person in many ways. we were discussing earlier about, how do you organize your life and how does your day look? Every day all depends a little bit on how my three girls wake up in the morning and whether they're sick, like the last 2 days, and we had to juggle that I was meant to travel and my wife had meetings and then we had sick children. So, it doesn't, we're good at that sort of like, okay, what do we do now? I think we've got a few things set up that make it possible, in the sense that set ourselves up financially and a whole series of other things that make it possible to be able to not get overwhelmed by, perhaps worrying about, can I pay the gas bill or whatever like that. I think these things matter. I think you have to make good decisions. You can't always do that. I'm not going to say that everyone has that opportunity, but sometimes you've got to work on those structures around you and make sure they are the ones that help you to be good at what you want to do. I think none of us are obsessed with going to the gym every day at 9 o'clock, and I like to go, but not every day. That's never going to work, So I think there has to be this wonderful art of pragmatism and compromise. I still think you can get there on the long. Sometimes you just have to say, okay, all right, we didn't make it this week, and being a little forgiving and giving room to each other in that process, and whether it be at work or whether at home, similar kind of challenge. Kids are throwing curveballs at you constantly, and they are an immovable force. You can't. Once they've decided it's going to be a bad day, there's nothing you can do about it. So whatever plan you had, you're going to have to revise it. So that's what I've learned about looking after kids, and I'm philosophical enough to say, okay, well, we're just going to have to catch up with it. And I think too, it's about not only the relationship that her and I have about working with the kids, it's the relationships around us that make that work. I mean, my ex-wife is my graphic designer, and we work together still, and she knows our new kids, and we celebrate with my big kids. So we have this crazy modern family, but that also helps make this work. In the sense that if you can find forgiveness and you can find a way to navigate through, relationships starting and ending and starting again, etc., that's all part of creating the right framework to be able to. So I'm not stressed about, am I? So I've tried to manage and get some of those relationships in place, and that makes things happen. And whether it be extended family as well, they're all there to help. They're willing to cheer you on, and they're there and available. But you also need to give something back to them. I mean, if you are active in their lives, they give something back, and that's that whole relational capital idea. You've got to invest in the people around you, and when you do, they pay you back. It's not necessarily sort of like that, but in principle, good relationships are good investments. They give you things back, and they are there to support you when you struggle. I mean, if you have a difficult day, you can call them and say, can you come round and help us out with a dinner or whatever? And these things can really matter.
Yeah.
As soon as you start doing it all by yourself, you're never going to do it. It's never going to be easy.
Yeah.
At that level.
Yeah, and I think particularly with kids, it takes a village and to raise a child, and people that try to put on the brave face and that try to do it all themselves and not reach out and ask for help, I think it's really hard to do that by yourself. I want to touch on a couple of things that you spoke about then when I asked you that question. You talked about when you're not being your best self, you're able to call each other on that. And is that about expressing what you need and saying, hang on, honey, that's not going to cut it today because I need this or I need that. And also you said compromise. So being able to be flexible in that give and take when you might be having a good day and your partner's not, or vice versa, in being able to pick up that slack and say, look, I can see that you're not having a good day. I know with my husband, sometimes he says to me, and I go, my resilience is low today, honey. That's my terminology for I'm having a bad day. So can we just park that and talk about it another day? You talked about compromise, forgiveness, and relational, that unit of when you're there for each other, when you need help, they're there for you, and when they need help, you're there for them. How does that, if you didn't have that in your life, how would your mindset be different if you didn't have that support network?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg issue here. One's connected to the other. Where does it start? If we look at, growth mindset is certainly the way I would define it. I define it a little differently to Carol Dweck would do it, in the sense that I look at it as we're really about relational potential. She talks a lot about what I call personal potential, about how do you become a good learner and maximize your performance and stuff like that. But in workplaces and in life, relational potential is much more interesting. In other words, how can you become who you want to become by way of the great relationships, whether it's be coaches or leaders or family members, etc. These all things really matter. And the crazy part when you interview a lot of leaders is they always say, I made it myself. And it doesn't make any sense because it didn't happen like that. I read a wonderful article recently about Steve Jobs. It's the first time he saw the iPhone. He said, that's a really bad idea and we don't want to do it. And it took him a lot of months to actually agree to the idea, which is a nice rewriting of a story that makes it out that Steve Jobs had some divine ability to be able to pick winners. In that case, he'd actually said no to it. So my point here is that even great leaders that we look up to are really dependent on lots of people who they often narcissistically don't mention, right? But there's no doubt that, in the measure of work I've done sort of finding and capturing great leaders, a lot of great leaders, in fact, probably the vast majority, aren't particularly flashy. There's an awful lot of also female leaders, women leaders that tend to underestimate themselves, but actually, when we do the 360s, are great leaders. And there's a lot of work to be done here to sort of I don't want to call it silent achiever. That's probably going a little too far. But in principle, a lot of great leadership is allowing your team to be fantastic. And often that requires a leader who can step aside and not all the time, but at times know when to step aside and when to take the lead. And there are some, these are not your usual, Jack Welch's, another leader who's been somewhat criticized recently in a very good book, revisiting his whole career. But I think it's time we have to, this is part of reinventing leadership and saying it's about relational potential, it's about relationships, about collaboration. And that's moving away from a very individualistic look at it. And I've got a big, we look at stress in particularly as an individual sickness, which is a really bad idea. We try to sort of help people with stress with just coping strategies and mindfulness, which isn't really going to help, because in general, it's a systemic problem. In other words, your team, your organization is overburdening you or isolating you or, turning you into a one-person army. And that's not good for you mentally. And COVID made it worse. But in general, our HR strategies are too much about self-help and self-care. And that's not going to solve this. Otherwise, we just end up in more opioid crisis like we're seeing in the US. We've got to care more. We've got to look after each other more. And that's what relational potential is about, whether it be the family or at work. It's the same idea.
I absolutely agree that the relational experience is paramount to mental health and for living a fulfilled life, because human beings are not meant to be alone. We're a tribal group and we're meant to have people around us, and you cannot succeed by yourself. You need people to help you, to lift you up, and you need to do that for others as well. And you mentioned Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, and that's where you got the inspiration for Safe to Great. In his book, Good to Great, he says a fifth dimensional leader, so a fourth dimensional leader to a fifth dimensional leader, when things are going good, he looks out his window and says, what a great job everyone's doing. And when things are going bad, he looks at himself and says, what can I do differently? Which is very different to a lot of leaders. When things are going bad, they blame the team, they blame the organisation, instead of saying, what can I do as the head of this organisation differently? Because you need, what got you here won't get you there, as Marshall Goldsmith says. And looking at what the problem is, you're not going to solve the problem with the same thinking that created the problem. So you need to look differently, and that needs to start from the top, from leadership. In personal life, that needs to start with you. And so I know for me that when things haven't gone well, I need to look at what I can do differently. How am I responding to those situations? What am I contributing to that? Because everyone contributes to the environment they create around themselves, but quite often we get in a victim mentality and we say, it's their fault, they're doing it to me. But what can we do to change it? Because even if you believe that to be somewhat true, you can still do something to change it. You can step away from it. You can change how you interact with them. You can do things differently. So you mentioned a book. You mentioned a book just then about Jack Welch from GE. For those who don't know who Jack Welch is, either that book or what other book you're currently reading, apart from your own, because you've written that you can recommend to our listeners, and why.
The book I'm referring to, I read recently, was the Jack Welch book. It's called The Man That Broke Capitalism. I'm pretty sure that's the title. That's probably a very sort of controversial, but it's a sort of historical look at, in hindsight, what are we seeing as what really happened there, which I think is important. I think there are a lot of books that I've had to read a lot of books with, writing my book, is reading a lot of current literature and sort of seeing particularly where the future of work is going, particularly where technology is going to take us. I talk briefly in the book around co-robotics, how we work with machines. We're going to have to talk a lot more about this. There's two sides of collaboration. One is working with humans, and the other one is the human to robot collaboration. I know that sounds really, really scary, but it's where we are. And we're going to have to spend a lot of time in HR thinking hard about this one, because the ethical issues are coming fast. And there's a couple of books. One's called the Globotics Revolution. But again, these are books about where we're going. I think if we're talking about understanding some fundamentals, I still think Carol Dweck's book around growth mindset is a good read. And it gives people an understanding of what I can do, how my own thinking, mindset, what is mindset? And I think that's a really helpful book. I think Amy Edmondson's book, Fearless Organizations, is a very powerful book to read. I'm a big fan of Linda Grattan. She's a professor of leadership at London Business School. She's written a whole series of books. Glow is a great book of hers. She's an academic, but she's got a wonderful writing style. Glow is a good one. Hotspots, these are slightly older books, but they're really, really good reads. Linda Grattan in general is a really good thinker. She's written recently about how do we manage the generation gaps at work, a bit of a future of work specialist. I like that. But I've been reading these really technical things about what's the future of healthcare, and what will, machines, what does it possibly mean for making healthcare more available, more human friendly, etc. And so I'm trying to understand where we're going in the world, because my job, if I'm going to help leaders, is I've got to understand what is emerging as these trends. So that's something I'm really, really interested in. And because I think it's our duty to try to pave the way forward with leadership development. I mean, leaders have to lead. I mean, and therefore we need to spend more time thinking about what's really happening right now and what are these emerging trends. I mean, ChatGPT has taken everyone and smacked us all around. The whole schooling system.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The schooling system is collapsing around us under the pressure of trying to deal with the level of cheating, whether we call it cheating or at least machine-aided learning. And the school teachers didn't see this one coming. I think this is a failure of leadership. I think school teachers do a fantastic and amazing job, but them, like so many other industries, are going to be caught completely blind because we haven't spent enough time as leaders thinking about how the future is going to impact us right now, not in some 10 years. It's happening really, really fast, and we're going to have to adapt to this. And Safe to Great is a little around that. So my real interest is reading books which are defining how certain industries are going to change. Healthcare is one of them. Schools is another one I want to do some more reading into, because I think that's our duty as leaders, is to really think about the future and then try to how to shape our decision making and how we help people get there and close that gap for them, because a lot of people are going to be left behind here. We know that. And if we don't provide pathways forward, I was talking to the head of learning at Lloyds Bank last week, and that was really interesting to hear how they're making. It's very hard for them to find skills, so they are, working really hard to retrain existing people who are being retrenched, so to speak, and then retraining them into these more digital roles. And him discussing how seriously they're taking that for the survival of Lloyds Bank, and that's really nice to see. But that's where we need to be looking as HR. We've got to take care of people in this transition. We can't just expect them to change without us caring about them.
And I think that's really, it comes back to relational relationships, caring, trust, knowing it's a safe place to speak up, knowing that you can say, I don't know how to do that and I'm not going to be able to do that job anymore, and then feeling safe to learn something new. And in today's age, I think particularly like ChatGPT has just thrown everyone. That's just one example of robotics. I know it's slightly different, but and how we need to learn to adjust and take on that new stuff. Because if we're stuck in the old ways of doing, then none of us are going to have jobs. So we need to be able to learn how to adapt. So you've mentioned a lot of books there, but I think for our readers that what I took away from that is Carol Dweck's Growth Mindset to help you understand your mindset, and then anything by Linda Grattan from London Business School, yeah?
Yeah, I love her work. I mean, I follow on LinkedIn, and she's been a researcher. Well, I think one of the best women researchers in leadership in the last 30, 40 years. She would definitely be on my list.
Fantastic. So what's next for you after you've launched this book in September? What's happening with you at the moment? What else are you up to?
Started book two. Book two. Yeah. From great to green. What we're doing is researching how organizations are either born green or how legacy organizations are transitioning into green organizations. So that's called the Great to Green journey. We're also looking at a collaboration with companies that are working within this, because we're going to see what we call ecosystem leadership emerging, which is sort of a shift out of sort of your classic corporate, this is our business, we're going to protect our business, we're going to compete just as our little thing. But ecosystems mean that you're trying to solve problems that are bigger than that. So I work with Amcor, for example. It's a plastic manufacturer. How do we work in an ecosystem where we create businesses, societies that can recycle the infrastructures, etc.? So this is bigger than Amcor. It's bigger than anyone, and that's what we call ecosystem leadership. And that's the central sort of like theoretical piece to the book, Great to Green. And I'm going to be actually collaborating with a company in Manchester who actually works in this. So we're going to try to explore how we can develop leaders in corporate settings, but also community leaders. Leaders working within government institutions to work within this ecosystem. So sort of like a more advanced version of sort of like the kind of collaboration you're going to need. Because if you're going to reinvent your energy systems or your heating system and cooling systems, you actually have to change the way people consume energy and stuff like that. And this can lead to fantastically really good outcomes, but it's going to lead to lots of change at the consumer behavior level, the way infrastructure is set up and so on. So we're looking at that sort of ecosystem of leadership, and that should be a bucket of fun. So that's book number 2.
Fantastic.
To add a little challenge.
So you've done a lot in your life. In terms of a legacy, what is the mark you'd like to leave on the world, or how would you like to be remembered?
I said it at the funeral of that fellow who inspired me, Kenneth Peterson, many years ago, that I said that he was, amongst many things, a literary critic and an art critic. And I said one of the amazing things about him was that he may not have been an artist. I mean, he spent a lot of time studying them and reviewing their work, but he was an artist of life. He lived his life. He made it art to live life well. And that doesn't mean drinking loads of wine or traveling necessarily, but building this sense of family, this sense of friends, and to have lived a fulfilling life on all levels is really what we're after here. There was a wonderful thing on LinkedIn recently, all these questions we asked, what have you achieved in life? Well, I'd like to look back on and say that I've led a fulfilling life, that I've painted a good existence, and I know that's sort of a bit fluffy, but, I'd like my kids to be inspired by the fact that, I wasn't all about work, and at times I made my work about something important for society, which is what I feel I'm doing today, which which is important, and that they can live life well, whatever that path is they want to choose it, and to be content with that, and then move on to next, whatever that is.
Just to finish up today, what piece of advice could you give to someone who's feeling overwhelmed or unsure or lost, or who's lacking confidence at the moment?
One of my best friends rang me yesterday and said his company had basically shafted him, and was about to toss him out. And this is a guy who's only got two very young children who haven't been very well over the last 3 to 4 months. He's been working pretty much 24/7 for the last 4 months in a row. And the gratitude he received for that was to get a warning. It's like, and I've been saying to him for some months, I just wish you'd, just reach out. I'm happy to, let's talk. Professionally, let's talk through what you're trying to do and let me help you. But asking for help really matters. And there's an awful lot of us that are too proud to do that. And, or too frightened of it, or whatever that happens to be. You need the people around you to help you see sometimes the traps you're falling into, the kind of, the mess you've got yourself into. And it's not a criticism. It's hard when you're in the middle of something overwhelming to be able to see ways out, or to see the reality of it, or see there are usually some exit strategies that aren't, necessarily financially problematic. There are ways to do these things, but I think you need an outside perspective, particularly on that. So don't get too isolated,
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're in the center of the hurricane, you can't see that there might be a little opening there, but someone else who you can share your story with and just be able to talk about it. And sometimes when you, I want to say vent, but when you express and you are able to release the emotions attached with that overwhelm, even then you might be able to see a different opening. But having someone else's perspective, I think, is an absolute fantastic tip. So thanks for sharing that with us, Skip. So that's all we've got today. Is there anything else you'd like to say to finish up with our audience?
No, look, thank you for the time today. Helen, it's nice to sort of we're talking about the whole person at work, which I appreciate. I think it's a super important question. We need to become more human in the future. There's no doubt about that. Love people to check out the book when it's available. safetodegrade.com is a place to start seeing, and there'll be a book there, and we'll be able to do some pre-release things if more people like to order. It'll be available electronically in around August, September in the year, and I'm hoping that we can continue our discussions and really sort of start thinking about how can you make other people feel safe so they can achieve some greatness. That's really what it's about, is how do we bring out the best in ourselves, but how do we bring out the best in others? And that's, if you like, what growth mindset is in a nutshell. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, fantastic. So keep an eye out for the pre-release for Skip's book, and you can order it ahead of time so that you make sure that you get in quick and get either your electronic or hard copy. I'll put the links to that in the show notes. So if anyone's interested, they can reach out to Skip directly or through his website. So thank you again for being here and the messages that you've sent to our audience today. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks, Skip.
Appreciate it.